Welcome to Make Your Money Matter with Brad Barrett, the show that aims to change the way you think about wealth management. Brad is a financial advisor, established radio host, and author of Retire Right. He is a managing director and partner at One Capital Management, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm managing over $4 billion for clients across the nation. Brad and his team are dedicated to helping clients protect and preserve their assets so they can reach their investment and retirement goals. And now, your host of Make Your Money Matter, Brad Barrett.
Welcome in to Make Your Money Matter. I'm your host, Brad Barrett. It is the week of Thanksgiving, and as such, I want to talk to you guys about giving thanks and what that actually means. And I promise you, I'm not going to go into some cliche environment. In fact, I want to share with you some background on Thanksgiving and what I think is important for us to value as we go into this week, especially as it relates to your relationship with your family and then ultimately your money. But before we get started, make sure to smash that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. All right, let's get into it. As we sit around on Thanksgiving tables this week, I am almost positive that the topic of conversation will inevitably, maybe even sadly, turn into something like politics. And we're living, friends, in an unusual, heated political environment over the past, really 5, 6, or 7 years. And this vitriol, it's pretty much apparent everywhere on TV and the papers, and of course, at our dinner tables. And because the country seems so politically polarized and energized, I'm fairly certain that there will become some heated conversations for each of us. And I can just envision one side of the Thanksgiving table, maybe a Democrat, another a Republican. They're exchanging insults separated by really only the turkey and the stuffing, which, by the way, are basic ingredients for a great food fight. But here's what I want to share that I think is really important. I want to really hit the nail on this here because I think it's a one I want to drive home, okay? This is a divided America. This is nothing new, though. That's what I want to share. In fact, there have been periods where the chasm between America's political camps have actually been much wider, if you can believe that. And opponents were even actually more polarized. Yet despite that truth, today's polarization, I think to many of us, it seems hopeless, but it's not. Let's all try to remember at this time of year, Thanksgiving, it's about what? It's about coming together as one. So let's be respectful, let's be kind, let's certainly be careful to limit the amount of wine we may give to our volatile family members. You know what I'm talking about. Anyways, having grown up in a family, with opinionated people, I know where I'm coming from when it comes to this about Thanksgiving. But Thanksgiving Day should be filled with family, good friends, plenty of food and cheer, celebrating our team, the American team, not necessarily the football teams. And I think our unique American values as one nation, indivisible. Let's not forget that the first Thanksgiving was celebrated in 1621. It began actually as a celebration of the autumn harvest, as they called it. And it was actually a very interesting story. So, the Pilgrims, many of you heard this before, but there's different variations of this, but this is the one that seems to be coming up as the most tried and true. The Pilgrims landed in 1620, and that first winter was, as you can probably imagine, brutal. I mean, a lot of people died from cold, from hunger. Food wasn't exactly plentiful, and shelter was obviously not the most important thing to them. So those who survived into the following year, 1621, were obviously pretty darn appreciative. And I think that the new settlers were helped a lot by the Wampanoag Indians, who were the main inhabitants of that region. So during the autumn harvest of 1621, the settlers and the Wampanoags came together, sharing their food and culinary skills in a day of celebration. And interestingly, there were roughly twice as many Wampanoags as there were settlers at this first Thanksgiving. And as legend has it, this is just a legend, they were all able to get along. Their common goal was at that time was simply to survive. And this year, I think some of us all have felt that same way at our Thanksgiving dinner table, right? Just trying to survive. But if you think about it, and we all have these kinds of things, we talk about this and we think about it, right? We give thanks and we realize that we have food on our table, we have shelter, a roof over our head. But in all seriousness, in 1621, things were harsh. I mean, life expectancy at that time was only about 35 years. So there was a lot less time to waste on superficial nonsense. I mean, surviving simply just staying alive was the main goal. And for many, it was a lofty one. I mean, the odds weren't exactly that high that you would survive. But obviously, if you fast forward, let's go fast forward to 2.5 centuries ago. It wasn't until 1863 that Thanksgiving was officially recognized as a national holiday. Now, if you look at that time period, our country at that time, 1863, we were in the middle of a civil war. It was deeply divided. In some ways, it's similar to today. And our president at the time, President Lincoln, seized upon that opportunity for a day of unity, all in an effort to bring a war-torn nation back together. I mean, the day was proclaimed an official national holiday and it actually remains such today, Thanksgiving. We're celebrating it this week. And it's evolved into a day filled with turkeys and parades and football and kind of the all-American day, if you will. And of course, right or wrong, political discussions at dinner tables. As I was reading this and researching it, I realized that there are actually many different versions of the 1621 autumn harvest, as there are people with different points of view. And everyone's entitled to those things. And leave your comment. If you have different stories, you want to share experiences, this is where to do it. I mean, there's always a different version of some subjectivity that's out there. But although it's now almost like 400 plus years ago, there are some who actually attribute a far more nefarious accounts of those days' events. But I digress. The legend of Thanksgiving that carried forward to 1863, the President Lincoln version, painted it as a day of appreciation. And that's what I choose to look at when it comes to Thanksgiving. And I want to share that with all of you. I hope you're doing the same. I know it's a day that can be divisive and we've changed the name of it here and there, and it's just everyone has their own opinion, and that's fine. It's the country we live in. That's a beautiful thing. But if we all just look at it as a day of gratitude, a day of appreciation, a day of that embodies our innate, natural, God-given tendency to care for our fellow man, which we all share. Both sides of the aisle share that, to care for someone else, right? To share, to come together as Americans, to all get along, to be respectful, even with those who we disagree.
Stay connected. Get frequent updates on the show. Follow Brad Barrett and Make Your Money Matter on most social media platforms. And catch full episodes of Make Your Money Matter streaming now on our YouTube channel. To schedule your no-obligation appointment, go to onecapital.com or call 805-410-5454.
I think it's easy to become disheartened about the great divide that separates America. I mean, the history of the United States and the direction in which the country has moved is defined really by our adherence to the idea of tolerance for other ideas that are actually memorialized, by the way, in the Declaration of Independence. The freedom to pursue happiness however you define happiness. Now, in the mid-1700s, bringing us to the economics and financial world, Adam Smith, who many of us know as a Scottish famous economist and philosopher, wrote about a cornerstone of societies that comprised of free people and free economies. And I think it's really important here to bring this together. Smith believed these societal structures must be free from coercion. Free societies are free from coercion. It's the only way they're possible, right? In fact, that's the only way they're truly actually free. Yet in the news, we've all been following recent stories everywhere about lack of freedom of opinion or the subjectivity of what that actually means to all those. And to be candid, I'm not entirely sure I fully understand how this relates to a lack of tolerance for others' opinions. If you're allowed an opinion, you got to let them have it. But when I was growing up, and I think many like you as a child, I was taught the basic model that many of us watching and listening were taught. I may not like what you have to say, but I will defend your right to say it. That's America to its core. And it was not only what we were taught, it was actually what defined us, right? I think us as Americans, peaceful disagreement, if you will, that's what it came down to. Now, although the initial 1621 Thanksgiving Day feast between the Wampanoags and the settlers predated the Declaration of Independence by more than a century, I think the values of Thanksgiving Day brought enlightened thinking, I think one step closer to the ideals that really would become the foundation of our great nation. You know, we see today, the day taught us that by caring for others, we all benefit. By being tolerant of others, we all can survive. Friends, put it this way. I know I'm talking about politics here. I normally don't, but I wanted to share this because it's a day of giving thanks and appreciation. But political freedom is essential. So too, friends, is economic freedom, and each is dependent upon the other. When one is suppressed, the other is injured too. Freedom of ideas, whether you disagree or agree with the ideas, really is essential to our development. I mean, America, if you look at it, is an economic marvel, and we know this, right? We've been around for only like 250 plus years. We're an economic marvel and a bastion of human opportunity because every citizen has the freedom to pursue their dreams, their ideas, and of course, their own definition of happiness. America has celebrated, I think, many Thanksgiving days where we had a deeply divided nation. Now, maybe this was part of President Lincoln's design for the holiday, especially given that every 4 years Thanksgiving arrives on the heels of a presidential election. So let me give you an example of something here that I wanted to bring it home today on. Do you remember a very close presidential election that divided the nation? I think I heard someone say 2020. And although that's a good example of an election that divided the nation, I was actually thinking of another one. Think of the 1960 presidential election. It was a very close contest, and I want to share some context with you today, okay? As a result of that election, America became a divided nation. Again, friends, this is not a new thing, being divided, okay? In the spring of 1960, the country fell into recession, brought really on by the poor economic climate of the late 1950s. And as history has taught us time and time again, presidential election results are largely determined by the country's economic climate at the time. Remember, it's the economy, stupid. Many people out here will remember that quote. I'll digress. And for that year's Republican candidate, 1960, Vice President Richard Nixon, the country's economic climate created an uphill fight for him. Now, in his battle for president against his Democratic opponent, the charismatic young senator from Massachusetts, we all know as JFK, John F. Kennedy. Now, ultimately, Senator Kennedy won the popular vote by like 112,000, which represented 49.72% of the popular vote versus 49.55% for Nixon. I share that stat because it's a very slim margin by any standard. Now, interestingly, Senator Kennedy won fewer states than his opponent, but the states he won were rich with electoral college delegates. I mean, does that sound familiar? Friends, I mean, shades of 2016, right? So Senator Kennedy was awarded 303 electoral college votes, and with that, JFK became America's 35th president. And from what began as a divided election result, he went on to become the most revered president in American history. Friends, my great hope, I think, and having this platform, as small as it may be, is that this Thanksgiving Day, like innumerable past Thanksgiving days, we as Americans look beyond our differences to our commonalities and really take pride in the miracle of America's freedom. I'd like to wish everyone with that notion a very happy Thanksgiving. And with whatever you do, as I always share, as I end our show, is whatever you do, make it matter.
The information in this show is educational and general in nature and does not take into consideration a listener's personal circumstances. Therefore, it is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized financial, legal, or tax advice. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a final decision.